Welcome to America's Top Rebbitzins. May this class be for Rafua Shalema, for Ayala Shahar, Bat Mariah. If you'd like to sponsor a podcast, please email us at atrebbitzins@gmail.com. I am so happy to have on today's show Dr. Tamar Perlman. Dr. Perlman is a clinical psychologist who works with women with a history of trauma and couples struggling in their marriages. She lectures extensively on topics of parenting, marriage, and dealing with emotions. She also teaches young brides of different backgrounds the laws and perspectives of a Jewish marriage. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell us more about yourself and what you do.
It is such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
And I think that what I do, very much so meets the vision and the investment that you make, which is bringing and trying to bring light and healing and understanding and comfort to Jewish women around the world.
That's beautiful.
I remember actually when I was in college, actually not in grad school yet, one of my great professors, I learned a lot from him. I remember he was making a point about the professionalism of a psychologist. He was one of my psychology professors, and I really learned a lot from him. But he had this distinction where he said, psychology is a skill. If you want to help people, become a Rebbitzin. And I remember at that moment thinking, I want to become a psychologist Rebbitzin. And I would say this is the first time that I am technically referred to as a Rebbitzin. And something about it tickles me in that, I'm not really a Rebbitzin. However, I would love to continue to try to be one in the idea of helping women.
That's so beautiful. Wow. It is really, really beautiful. And I know we're going to help the topic that we're going to talk about today. I know it's going to help many people. So today I would like to focus on parenting teenagers. Now, this age group can be a really big challenge for many parents. I personally know many parents who struggle with parenting their teenagers. And I want to help this time to make this time easier for both the parents and the teenagers by focusing on how we can ease some of the issues that could cause friction in the family dynamic. The teenage years are a struggle for independence for many kids. They want to find their own identity, and they're not little kids anymore who need to be attached to their parents all the time, but they're still not quite ready to go on their own. They're in that kind of in-between stage. They're in the middle ground between little kid and grown up, and that's where the battle occurs. So how can parents encourage their teenager to be more independent as they try to figure out their mission in the world, while at the same time encouraging their teen to ask for help in situations they find difficult, whether those situations are emotional or social?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like in any good question, the answer is kind of in the nuances of what you're asking. As you're referencing, like adolescence is a transitional time. And it's a transitional time in more than one way. Like you were talking about attachment and independence.
Yes.
So there is always this tension between a parent and a child, between attachment and independence. And in fact, it starts off our entire relationship with our children, especially as mothers, starts off very much so with the tension of attachment and independence, where in our birthing process, where we literally detach, and we detach from the child detaches from us. That's when the child is considered an independent self. Wow. And that transition is physical at the time. It is mostly extremely physical, right? And raw in that physical sense. And it hurts. Detachment hurts, but detachment is a necessary component in any transition and growth to independence. And as children grow, and as the parent-to-child relationship grows along with it, it becomes this tension between attachment and independence becomes less and less physical and more emotional, psychological, spiritual. And adolescence is kind of like the pinnacle of the emotional and psychological. It's like the birth psychologically to the adolescent, to the child. And I think what's shocking often is how it hurts. We don't expect labor not to hurt or delivery not to hurt, but the that separation, that link that is being challenged hurts during adolescence, and it hurts both the parent and the child. Now, obviously, this is a necessary component because just like the child needs to exit the mother's womb in order to be a self, the adolescent needs to detach in some way to be a self. And that is part of the process of the adolescent growing up. And of the parent seeing the child as more and more separate than them. You know, something fascinating that I learned more recently from Moshe Shapiro on the language of dat, which is a type of knowing or a type of knowledge or a type of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And it's a language that's used actually with when it comes to intimacy, marital intimacy. It is referenced, dat is used in Genesis and Bereshit, as in Adam knew his wife. Yes. And the word dat is used as in knowing. So what kind of knowing is this? It's always interested me. And I recently got to learn it from Rav Moshe Shapiro, that dat occurs specifically in adolescence.
Oh, interesting.
And why is that? What is it about dat that occurs in adolescence? Is that in adolescence, that's when the ability to see extrinsic reality is developed, to see yourself as outside of someone else and to see someone else as separate from you. At first, when children are born, they need the illusion of complete protection and dependence on us. They need it in order to feel safe in the world. Like last night, you know, one of my younger kids was awakened by, it's the first time he's done that. He said, like, oh, I'm scared of monsters. It was like tender and painful and sweet. And, you know, you feel so empowered as a parent at that point because you could protect them from these invisible, unreal monsters. And you're like, oh, there are no monsters. And you are sure about that. And you can hold him and he's so safe. And that safety and that attachment, he needs that to enter the world and to survive and to be a self. I've got, you know, it's like this feeling of complete dependence on Hashem, like he's got my back. Like someone here completely engulfs me in protection. But he doesn't know yet. But you and I know that there are certain monsters, God forbid, we can't protect anyone from. But he's too young to know that then. It would be too disorienting. He wouldn't be able to survive and live in the world. He knows that too soon. Right. So that attachment is necessary. But then during adolescence, they start to see you as separate from them. And they start to see, oh, you can't fully protect me from it all. You can't even fully be sure that you're going to be there for me always. I need to figure this out on my own. It's extremely scary. Yeah. It's extremely disorienting. It's you don't even often have the language as an adolescent that it is so scary, but something is happening and it's uncomfortable, but you're in that developmental stage and something is happening to the parent and the parent is also uncomfortable. But all of this is part of the power and the beauty of the birth to the self and the birth of the adult that this child is about to become.
Wow, that's so beautiful and so necessary and so complicated and so emotional all at the same time.
Yes, it really is. It is all that. That's kind of parenting. You know?
It really is. Oh my gosh. But along those lines of separatism, parents often have like a certain vision for their teen who is now, as we were saying, really striving to be a separate being from their parents. But parents really often have a certain vision for their teen, a specific direction that they want their teen to go to. And however, the teen sometimes has views that are completely different than the parents' views. And I want to see if you could talk to us about how parents can balance their desire for their teen's future with what the teen wants for him or herself.
It's also a very good question. So I'd want to make 3 points on that. One is that when a teen has different views, the parent usually doesn't like that.
Yeah.
And most of the time, it's because it elicits a lot of guilt and insecurity and confusion and incompetence and a sense of irrelevance in the parent. Like, what have I done till now? Like our entire lives, we've been talking about this, and now suddenly they don't care about that. Like, it just makes you feel completely disempowered as a parent.
Exactly.
And it makes you question your own values. Like, what does this even matter? And it just makes you feel weak and irrelevant. And the guilt I find with the mothers is one of the biggest pieces, because, except you and I, most people aren't perfect, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And we know the things we could have done better, or the things that we wish we had done better with this child and that child.
Exactly.
And we see kind of the fragmentations of our limitations and some of the struggles our children experience. And those fragmentations hit us in the face like a slap that we didn't expect. And we don't want it. We're like, no, don't make me challenge myself and make me look at myself. When an infant wakes up in the middle of the night, we are frustrated, but we're not mad at him for challenging our sleep. We expect that to be the case. But when an adolescent challenges us in not being our vision, it makes us look at ourselves more honestly, and it's uncomfortable. And then sometimes we turn it into blame, like, if you were different than that's not the language we use, but only if you did this a little better and did this a little bit more closely to it, then I wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable with the way I've parented or the mistakes I know I've made with you.
Exactly.
So I would say the first piece is to, related to our first questions, recognize what is yours and what is theirs. And the more honest you can be with yourself, the more you can shed parts of you that need to be shed, the more you can use your guilt as a means of self-reflection, not as a means of getting stuck and blaming the child. Then the more honest and valuable of a dialogue you can have with your child. So that, what I would say, is the first piece, is if you're not asking yourself questions and really looking internally while your child is an adolescent, it doesn't even matter to me what the content is. If you're not asking the questions, then there's something is not right. If you're not looking internally, that something is not right.
I agree.
So that's the first piece I would say, is to recognize that they're supposed to wake us up at night. They're supposed to make us uncomfortable and question things. And no one parents perfectly. And imperfect parenting is part of their journey too. And the dynamics that occur between us and our children, and the limitations between us, in us, and how it limits them, is part of their journey too. So if that helps me ground, while I try to always work on that self and those limitations. It helps me ground that I've been the parent chosen for them. And I have been the one that's been given the gift and the challenge of parenting them, and they've been given the gift and the challenge of being parented by me. And then that's part of their journey. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, you were talking about, if the child is different than you. I would say that a lot of times what this does is it makes us really identify what our real values are and what our real values aren't. It's like, what are the barriers to ourselves and what are the externalities? There's something that teens cannot stand. And it's when the value or the vision or mission that you communicate isn't about the mission, that it's about something external. That they're allergic to that. And it is hard for them to take that in. So raising adolescents makes us need to be more authentic and also more clear about what our values are. So if, for instance, your value is about the way they present in the world, right? Mm-hmm. That they are kind and they are good to others. But at the same time, they see that there's something in you that also is about pleasing others and having others accept you and having others respect you, that will make you challenge and get more to the core value, which is it's about kindness versus it's about pleasing. So they're going to challenge that, and they're going to want to not please. And they're going to make you face, is it about pleasing, or is it really about the internal, about being kind? So those are the things that occur. And I would say that it is important to have values and hold on to them, while at the same time be in touch with your kid, see where they're at, and be curious about how they're different and what that means to you. Curiosity is one of my favorite words when it comes to any relationship, because when you're curious, you're open to knowing something that you don't yet know.
Right.
And I think that just like if a child comes to you crying that a friend was mean to them when they're 5, he took my marker and it was the purple one and I wanted the purple one and he took the red one. And then, you can respond with empathy, and they want to see that it matters to you. But if you fall apart and you're not a self, and you're just like, I can't believe he did that, and I'm so upset, I'm going to call the mother. And I'm not saying that none of these things are ever, the right thing to do, but if your child sees that you're falling apart, that's really disorienting to the child. So I would say the same thing with adolescents. You need to see that the way they're different from you is impacting you. You're looking at them, you're seeing, wait, should I be more flexible in this? Let me be curious about what this means for you. Let me lean in and ask you, what is important to you about this? But at the same time, if their difference is completely rattling you and you're just letting go of all your values and you're kind of joining them, then that's disorienting to them too. So you need to have this tension between holding on to your values, becoming more authentic with them, shedding parts that aren't really your values, and at the same time being flexible and curious with them.
Oh
Very
my
easy.
gosh.
Very easy. I'm just, right?
Such a balancing act. Oh my gosh. It's so true. Everything that you said, it's so overwhelming though. I know. I think it takes time. It takes time. I guess that's why 13 is from 13 until 19, because you need all that time to develop those skills to do that.
Yes, it does take time. It takes time. And that's actually a gift, no? That adolescence I'm saying it's long, but it's also a gift because we get to grow into it.
It's for sure.
Scraping our knees.
It's for sure. And you know what's so interesting, like what you were saying about the kids trying to look to see what our values are, versus, trying to please others. They really have a knack for doing that. They really do have a knack for doing that.
Yes.
And also I heard it said that kids are a mirror of us. So sometimes when you see your kid behaving a certain way and it really, really irritates you, you have to, as you were saying, you have to look inside yourself, because you might have that same characteristic that's playing out in your child. And that might be something that you have to fix in yourself.
Right. So that was the piece about the guilt and incompetence is every kid will in a way be a mirror of our strengths in some ways, and our values and the kohot, the positive kohot that we have. And Rebbetzin Heller always says in her lectures that everything we have is kind of funneled through our parents. All the gifts are funneled through them. So all the gifts our kids have are funneled through us. But also, like I was saying earlier, like the fragments of our limitations will be seen in different parts of their personality. And that's always very pleasant. And yes, it makes us kind of feel insecure and guilty and all that stuff, which takes away from the energy of parenting them, of being there for them.
Right, exactly. It's very, very true. And because we're looking internal and we're thinking and we're feeling, and many of us feel guilty. How many people have that mommy guilt? I mean, I bet so many other people listening. I know so many people I know have that mommy guilt. It's
right. If anyone has the consciousness to listen, they have the consciousness to have the guilt.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Exactly. Well put. But it's interesting because teenagers, I think more than any other group of people, they think they have all the answers. They have everything figured out. They don't need to be told anything. they have everything under control except that they actually don't. And that's the issue. They don't have, the teens don't have the life experience that they need to always make the best decisions for themselves, but also they're not always willing to listen to their parents, and they don't not listening to listening to their parents input. So what is some advice that you can give to parents to encourage their teen to at least listen to them for their input before they actually make a decision, especially if it's a really big decision?
Right. This is also I would say like a tiered answer. And like that, the answer to that doesn't start at 13. That I would say is the investment in the relationship and in the safety that the child feels and in the comfort the child feels with the parent. If they feel this parent is interested to know me and has my best interest in mind, they will more likely be able to receive from the parent than not. And that's something that's built earlier on.
Yes.
So I would say, and what would be the most, to the point of the child thinks that they know everything and they don't. So to that point, I want to say two things. There's a great book called Altered Loves. It's by a psychologist. Yeah, it's by a psychologist. Her name is Dr. Terry Apter. I actually wrote it down before we met this morning. I wanted to look it up. And she actually had, just like most good books, there's usually like one idea that stands out that I learned from, unless it's from Torah, which is much more layered than that. But for most good secular books, there's usually one good idea that stays with me. And a good idea that stayed with me from Terry Apter is, she said, what sometimes feels like obnoxiousness and a power struggle between us and them is often not what the adolescent isn't struggling to have power over us, but is struggling to have power over themselves. It's for self-mastery, not for you mastery. They actually need to now go on their own. And this feeling of they know it all is part of the blanket or the cape they use in order to be able to do it. So it has its function too.
Okay.
Then the second piece I want to say to that is sometimes we think we know it all. And we also don't. That's part of our illusion and our cape. They're like, yeah, we know it all. So like, to the second question, like when I use the word curiosity, I would keep ourselves curious. Like, do we know it all? Do we have all the answers? Are our answers actually the right ones? Is this actually what's happening? The third piece that I would say, however, in regard to how is it, to your overall question with this third question is how to have the type of relationship where they actually hear from you. And I've heard this from Rebbetzin Heller Gottlieb many times, that there's many things you could overdo with your children. You could overdo with, restriction. You can overdo with freedom. You can overdo with allowances. You can overdo with not enoughness, but you cannot overdo with one thing, and that's respect. You cannot underestimate the amount of respect is important when it comes to your children. So anything that happens between you and your child, if it's done with respect, and what does respect mean is taking them seriously, really listening, like for real, which means that there's some openness and vulnerability on your part as you're with them, really being present with them, really taking what they're saying to heart and seriously. If you give them respect, they will not have to protect themselves from hearing you, because they'll already feel honored in your eyes.
Wow. That's powerful. Respect is powerful. It really, really is across the board.
Yes, it is. And it kind of connects to the first point of individuation, which is when you respect the other, you see the other as separate from you.
Yes. Wow. It's so interesting that point like really, really resonates. I'm thinking so hard about this because I don't know. so usually when people think about respect, they think about, respecting their peers, respecting adults, respecting authority figures. It's not often referred to as people should respect children. And I totally agree with you. Children should often be respected. It's just, I don't feel like it's a common mindset for many people.
Yes, I agree. It is kind of like a switch, and there's something vulnerable for us in that. Like, where's our power if we're respecting them? But what you want isn't power. What you want is impact.
Exactly. Impact. Yes.
Yes. And when you lean into respect, you have more impact, even though in the moment it feels less powerful.
This is so true. Very, very true. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. Um, so this brings me to my last question. Teenagers can sometimes be moody and withdrawn.
What? Really?
I know, surprise, surprise.
Is it only teenagers? They say teenagers and mothers can be moody and withdrawn.
So true. So when you ask them a question, you are lucky if you get a one-word answer. How was school today? Fine. Did you like your food? Yes. What do you want to eat? I don't know. Teens don't readily or easily share information. They just don't. It's hard for parents to know what's really going on with their kids at school or in their social life with their friends. What is the best way for parents to encourage their teens to communicate with them about what is happening in their lives?
Some of my clients, like I'm sitting here in my office, like my couch is right across from me, come to mind as you say that. Most of the time when I'm working, I don't anymore work with young adolescents in my practice. I work mostly with older adolescents, young women, and couples. And it's just a boundary I had to set just for sake of access and working with my time limits. But I have these like images of the teens sitting in front of me, and older teens, mostly 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. And most of the time when they come in, I try to have them have more of their mother than they already do. I recognize that I will never replace the power, even to 10% of its capacity of providing what their mother can provide for them. And if I can help them have more of that access to that relationship, that would be of the most powerful ways to use our treatment. So, often they share something with me. And like, for instance, this one girl comes to mind. As I often do, I change the details, but I keep the lesson and share the lesson with you. She had overcome something, a big challenge. She had gone to a party, and at the party, there were challenges that she didn't foresee. And she stood up to almost lean into the challenge, and then she backed up and sat back down. And I remember that moment, and I just like was sitting there, and I was like celebrating that moment with her. And there's like a part of me that feels this like a sadness and a little bit maybe even of a guilt of like, your mother should be the one doing this with you. Like, I wish your mother got to know this piece, and I wish you got to have this with your mom. It's almost like I want to suspend myself and pluck her mom into the experience for both their sakes. Right. So it's delicious, but there's something about it that hurts every time. And often I ask, depending on the relationship, could you tell your mom? Mm-hmm. And often I get the answer, you kidding me? I won't even get past the point of why I was there to begin with. Right. She'll just start yelling and judging and blaming, and I'll be so embarrassed and I'll be so mortified. I won't even get to the part where I sat back down. Right. So I can't express this any more deeply than I feel, in that if we want our kids to talk to us, we need to be willing to really listen. And if you're really willing to listen, your child will want to talk to you. They want it. They need you. They do. They need your connection. They need your approval. They need your pride. They need your guidance. Now, for some, you're right. It is much harder to share in general than with others. Some kids have some adults, some humans have a harder time with sharing emotion and vulnerability. Yeah. And I think that it's important to build on it. So if they give you one word, build on the word. Anything that's done with pressure is resisted with resistance, right? Yes. So I would say the most important part, build yourself as a listener, as a safe listener. And the second piece is build the communication based on the little things that they give you. Like work with the little that they give you and then work upon that. And definitely saying things like, you don't tell me anything, just will shut them down because they're like, oh, I'm incompetent and I can't even talk to them. I'll never please them.
Right.
So, like let's say every once in a while they give you a word that's a little bit different. So let's say they say a word like, how was your day? And let's say they use the word, I remember this one time with one of my kids, it was mixed up. So that becomes like a catchword, like mixed. What is mixed? Like mixed, like with good and with bad, like use their word and then build on it. As opposed to kind of coming at with your questions, like lean into where they're at and see what they give you and then try to build on it. And it's arduous, it's hard. And not all of them are as forthcoming as others. But again, that's their journey of how forthcoming they will be. Our journey as mothers is being open and being welcoming.
That's, you brought up such a good point for me, like just something that resonated deeply, because some kids they come home, everything that happened. Yes. That for everybody else's family, what everybody else had for dinner, what the teacher said today, where somebody else is going to go on their vacation, everything. And then other kids come home, nothing. Yes. Silent as a mouse.
And it's very scary, that unknown space, like you feel in the dark.
And exactly, yes. And so, yes, so you feel in the dark, but you also wish that this particular child would be as open and effusive and communicative as the other one. And you're like, what's wrong with you, or what's wrong with me? Like, why,
Yeah, that's back to that guilt place of like, something's wrong, we need to fix it.
Yes.
That sense of shame, by the way, is one of the big pieces of what's good to keep away from a relationship, because a lot of times things are not wrong. Things are just choppy and things are a journey, but they're not wrong. But when we have intensity, it just creates a lot of like shame, which teens already have on their own. So it's good to modulate that on our own, like to quiet our own intense responses and to self-soothe in that space of the unknown and in that space of ambiguity and insecurity. And this is the place, like I can't not say this part, because this is part of, I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday. This is part of every piece of my journey, but especially in parenting, that we were just recently choosing together collaboratively high schools for our daughter, which is all of this stuff.
Yes.
The values and the openness and the what do you hold on to, what do you let go, and the trust and the fear and all of that together, big mush. And I remember sharing with a friend that, like, I remember feeling like the details when I was in high school, like details coming together and like leading me on a certain path. And as I look back as an adult, I see these tiny little, like doors that were open that ended up being really big. Like, there was this one elective. I went to after high school.
Okay.
And there was this, which is a co-ed modern Orthodox high school. And there was this one elective that, a Jewish class elective that a lot of people avoided because it was very hard. And, people wanted to get easy A's in their electives, and people avoided it. And, so did I, because, I was doing what everyone else was doing when it came to that. But I didn't like sign up for any other elective. And the principal, Rabbi Bajnan at the time, called me into the office and he said, Tammy, I'm going to put you in that elective where there's only 4 other girls, and it's like a long class and it's arduous and it's hard work. And I was already taking AP Psych and AP this and AP that. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't have time for this. But I was too embarrassed to tell him. And I was put in with this group that I didn't belong in. And it ended up being and we learned the principles of faith, the 13 principles of faith, and Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of our fathers. And it was a beautiful class, and it taught me the depth and the layers of what's in the wisdom of our sages and of the Torah. And I was amongst this peer group that helped me grow into belonging with them.
Wow.
And I remember this moment yesterday as we are in this like vulnerable place of choosing a high school. And I was thinking, Hashem really watched that for me. He just opened that door and I didn't even know it. I resisted it. And it ended up being such a meaningful piece. And I'm like, Hashem is right here with my kids in the places where I can't see them.
Right.
In the places where I don't see their doors and I don't see the dark rooms that they're in, they're not alone. So when we parent, it feels very lonely and it feels really dark sometimes. But we have to remember that they came into the world with partners, with our husband and with the partnership of Hashem, like putting a soul into their body. And Hashem is still partners with us in the parenting. And that to me, if I didn't have that, I feel like I'd have nothing.
Right.
And having that, I feel like I have everything.
That's so well said. It makes all the difference in the world.
Right?
It really does.
Yes. And sometimes I bring that in my most intimate talks with God. And I'll just come and tell him, like, I don't know what's happening with this child. Like, I'll just talk to him about it.
Because he knows exactly what's happening. He knows he's making it happen.
Yes. And he knows like the vision of that and the purpose of that for the future and for where it's coming from the past. But we don't. We just see the moment and like the one word answer. And we're like, what's going on?
Right. We're so limited.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow. It's so true. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Perlman, for taking the time to join us on America's Top Rebbitzins. We really enjoyed having you here. And I know we all learned so much. I know that I did. May this class be for Rafua Shalema, for Ayala Shahar, Bat Mariah. Thank you. Thank you so much again.
Amen. It's been my pleasure. And thank you so much for the wonderful work that you do.
Thank you.
And for the opportunity, the trust and the opportunity of connecting to more women and more ideas and connections in the world. Thank you.
My pleasure. Amen. Thank you.